Hi everyone. How's it going? Um, I've just had, I guess, a thought that I wanted to share with you all. Um, I guess it's about the self, the ego, and I've always been a proponent that the ego is the most important thing. That through spirituality, we increase the power of the ego and the self, and the only thing that should be above it is God. And it's just this idea that struck me where I was thinking about art. And, if there's something like the Iliad, and the Iliad has been adapted many times. Troy, the movie 2004, is one example. And I just thought, when you have an original idea, an original concept, and you have derivatives of it, in my practice, I've always wanted to go to the source of something, because as good as as Troy is as a movie with Brad Pitt and whatever, the original idea came from this ancient book, this archetypical thing that was from the wellspring of an individual from Homer, and it lived on through thousands of years. It's an incredible idea to think about. And I elevated this to a spiritual context. And it's almost a Platonic idea, where if you could trace back, let's say, all thoughts, all notions of philosophies, identities, constructs, isms, whatever, to a singular source. If you could, in the way that you could watch Troy and then it leads you to the Iliad. And this is something I just realized about myself, is that I was talking to someone about, why I play video games or watch certain movies. It's because those games and those movies and those experiences, there's something in them that they provide context. They provide a greater knowledge and understanding about the world. And it's just a way to dramatize and make that information sexy. It's like, oh, cool. I didn't understand what it felt like to live through the Soviet Union until, you read Alexander Solzhenitsyn's book. And unfortunately, there's not a version of that. It's besides maybe the video game Peripetia, where it's trying to have this incredibly dystopian communist outlook. And all of these pieces of art all function as versions of ideas. And so I took that and I realized that's what I was really into. That's why I was attracted to certain games, not only because they're entertaining. Something being entertaining is important. The fact that it educates you in a tacit manner. It says, oh, this is kind of a version of the truth, and it comes back to a source. And so I said, well, it's kind of a scary idea, to be frank with you, but what if you could take every single experience you've ever had, and its root cause goes back to a single source. Every idea, every concept, every physical thing you could see would be tied back to a original source of everything, which would be God. It's something I've thought about, that the Roman gods, like Zeus, Jupiter, I get the Roman and the Greek mixed up, but Demeter, and Dionysus, Hades, etc. Each one of these gods represents a certain distinct archetype and concept. And so I kind of realized or rationalized that, if you were a farmer and you were praying for a harvest, you would pray to Demeter. You would pray to Saturn, the reaper of the harvest, for a good harvest, right? You would pray to a different god for a different idea, and each god was a they had a personality, they had a story around them, but they were an encapsulation of a specific human archetype or concept. And when you think about monotheism, the idea of a monotheistic God is the concept of concepts. The God of God, the King of Kings, is that it's the originator of all of these archetypes, of all of these ideas and all of these concepts. And it's really incomprehensible in that sense, because you want to take all of every possible human emotion and experience and encapsulate it in a single spot or person or place or idea and think this is the originator of every possible imaginable thing. They talk about things beyond comprehension, things beyond imagination. That's what it would be. It's the source. And the terrifying thing that I'm thinking about right now is in the way that I appreciate Troy with Brad Pitt from 2004, I can go back to the source of the Iliad and I can read that thing and say, oh, this is a pure form of that idea and that concept. And furthermore is that when you read the original point, you realize, oh, someone read this and filtered it and reinvigorated or transformed it. And sometimes the transformation can be almost better than the original, but it's not the original implicitly. And because of that, as much as I like the movie, I'm forced to see it as a derivative idea that it is essentially a child of a parent. And you hear that biologically or in programming language. And the reason why this, I think, almost scares me is if you were able to comprehend the source of all things, if you were actually able to know God in not just a simple religious concept. And this is something else I was talking about, that Christianity as a church or religion or as a series of concepts is not holistic. And what I mean by that is the way I've maybe recently began looking at religion and Christianity is that it's not an end. It's really a means and a beginning. And I've been reading through the Bible, and I think if I finished reading all of it, I still wouldn't be done in a certain way. It's kind of like like, how religious are you? How Christian are you? Or do you have to read the whole Bible? Do you have to go to Mass every Sunday? Do you have to live your life entirely? Do you have to be one of the early apostles, or not apostles, but these early priests who would sit on pillars in Syria for their whole lives, kind of thing? But that's kind of besides the point. But the idea is that if you so sorry, what I'm getting at is that even if you fully comprehended every aspect of the Catholic Church, the catechisms, everything, I don't think it would be enough, because this is still just one method of understanding God. And really the idea, and I think the reasons why anti-Christian sentiment exists is that there are hyper-intellectual people who say that this is insufficient for my knowledge, for my lived experience. And they'll say things, and I can understand it. Well, this is my lived experience, and what's written in the Bible and what my pastor preaches or what my priest teaches doesn't reflect or connect with me at all. And that's almost kind of the point, is that Christianity, I think it's a very good way, a very direct and very well structured way to understand God, but it's I hate to say this, but I think it's insufficient. And I think it's supposed to kind of be that way. I think that to have this idea that God is truly something even almost beyond Christianity. For example, you can, I've been reading Voltaire, and he'll take concepts or ideas that, are kind of nitpicky, where it's like, oh, well, the Garden of Eden, one of the common things is that the Garden of Eden story was adopted. God making the world in 6 days and resting on the seventh, that was adopted. These gods are adopted. Pagan rituals were adopted into it. And the point is that, the standard point is like, oh, well, it's not real because they were adopted from other religions and beliefs. Well, I mean, you can say that, but then are you saying that those pagan ideas were also not real? And then you think, well, okay, and you want to open it up and say, well, Christianity isn't the only way to believe. And I think it, because it has incorporated and it has built on these ideas that the concept is so large and so complex that Christianity has absorbed these ideas like an amoeba. And that's what makes it such an efficient way of getting to the spiritual life. But I think if you understood everything, it wouldn't be sufficient, because the idea I'm really trying to get to is that I'm sorry, I'm trying to get through this. But when you compare the Iliad to Troy 2004, as much as you might like that iteration of that art, it's a derivative. And my point I'm trying to get to is that if you were actually able to understand God through Christianity and every other religion, it wouldn't be enough. Because if you actually understood God in his full context and his full understanding and his full idea that there is a God even beyond the understanding of the most studious Catholic or Jew or whatever, that if you could reach that wisdom or that understanding, then everything, including Christianity, including all the doctrines, all the people, all the worship, would be derivative. And in the same vein, in the Platonic style, how all ideas or all physical things come from a notion of forms, and these forms are in this sort of heavenly realm where the idea exists and there's physical derivations of it. And you think about the form of forms, the God, the monad, the whatever, the idea of God himself, the word, if you will. If you could come into contact and comprehend that, then by extension, the kind of horrifying, scary idea is that everything around you would be derivative. It would be all fake. Everything you can see, everything you can look at, even your emotions, even yourself. We have this idea that, Adam and Eve, Adam was the first man, but what if that really was true? What if you really were descended from a single person, that you are Adam? And it's to fully believe that, to fully encapture that idea, there's a part of it, I think, that takes away from the ego and the self, that you realize you are a derivative. You are just a descendant of Adam. You are just a leaf on a branching tree that has gone on for, thousands of years, but to the creator of all of this, it's been like this. And I've never felt the emotion of God-fearing more than I have in this moment. I've never understood why fear, which is a negative emotion, should be associated with God, and it only becomes relevant and obvious until you've, I think, comprehended your nature is that you are a derivative of a derivative of a derivative of flesh, and that flesh was given form by more or less magic, by spoken word, by a spirit, and that the original idea of who you are was once a man. That was an idea by an even higher entity that spoke him into creation and breathed into this dirt and dust. And I really have always advocated for the ego in a world which seems to be constantly attacking the ego. And I think it's good and it's healthy to have an ego, but it's to humble it and be a servant to not just God, this higher power, but to be a servant to the word or the concept that you came from. If you think about, how you were created in the womb, that system of male and female and an egg growing you, it's very easy to just take that at face value, take it for granted. So, well, that's just how nature operates, right? But where does nature come from? Who designed nature? Who decided, we need male and female. They can't just asexually reproduce. That'd be crazy. And there are examples of asexual reproduction in, I think, viruses and other kind of organisms. But you go back to the idea of the first mover, the designer, the idea that every effect has a cause that implicitly is greater than it. That energy cannot be destroyed but only transferred, and therefore a higher energy, or a higher effect would have to be created by even higher being, essentially. And so it's this scary, weird idea that I personally am in some way directly connected to God in a non-arrogant, weird way, because I'm, if you think about what Adam was, flesh upon flesh, birth upon birth, Adam was spoken into existence. He's just an idea. We're just ideas. We're just all derivatives. We're kind of fake in a weird way. And this is maybe not, I don't know how this will be received or thought about, but it's an idea that it kind of terrifies me to the core of my being, that it's not that I'm not in control of the world around me. I mean, I'm obviously myself. I obviously have free will. I mean, I wouldn't make this video if I didn't have free will, right? But it's the idea that I'm not better than this table because someone had to think of this table and design it and make a crappy IKEA catalog to put it together, or whatever I'm surrounded by. And it's kind of a very spiritual, almost Buddhist kind of perspective, is that there's nothing in this world that's actually real. Even our desires and our emotions aren't real. They're just derivatives from the source. And it's a paradox, because at one hand, you are just a thing inspired by a thing, inspired by a thing. You are Troy 2004, and thousands of years ago, there was once the Iliad by Homer, and you're just a version of that idea. And while that's at one point very ego dampening, you could say. At the other point, it's incredibly empowering because your essence is from something divine. It's from something that you can't even comprehend. You can't even understand it. And that's what terrifies me. It's the ultimate juxtaposition and paradox of being absolutely nothing and absolutely everything at the same time. And I don't know, it's a little bit scary to think about, mainly because, I mean, at least this is more so a Christian idea that you don't find in Islam or Judaism, and which is that, Christ, or rather, God through Christ, comes down to our level. And you don't see it in a lot of other religions, like, even like Hinduism. Sometimes the gods reincarnate, I guess, but the gods plural, not the God, the ultimate unknowable entity. And it's the idea that he'll come down into our level and somehow manifest in a way that we can be eye to eye. And there's that the idea that we can have a personal connection with the infinite, the unknowable, that this little tiny creature, this animal, can commune with with something so beyond its comprehension, and the nature of that comprehension, if it's fully embraced, is love. Because just as an ultimate principle, and I think there are very few ultimate principles in the world, one thing that I've seen is that every act of creation is an act of love. People who design toys or weapons, people who create birthday cards or events or whatever, even people who plot revenge, there's a kind of beauty in the design. There's complexity. There's something there that is unique. There is something passionate about it. And that's a kind of love that isn't, between a family or man and woman. It's a supernal, platonic love for existence itself, for the world. And that love seems to be the thing that animates everything. It's the essence of everything. And I feel like when we try to comprehend God in a non-religious but a purely spiritual essence, we just feel this love, because it's almost like what's a good analogy? It's like a computer program that gets a Stack Overflow. It's like a USB drive that is meant for, a few megabytes trying to download a bunch of gigabytes. We can't swallow it and engulf it into ourselves. And I'm sure there's been a lot of spiritual practices where they've tried to do just that, where they've tried to summon or bring God down to our level, or commune with him, or have them be possessed in some cases. I don't know. But I think because it's so beyond our understanding, it almost defaults or fills into a lesser version, which is just this love of everything. Because if we were to fully know or experience the source of everything, I don't know how we could exist. I don't know if God appeared to you in his full radiance, and I don't mean God in a biblical or Islamic or a Jewish context. I mean the God that is beyond comprehension, beyond religion, if you could actually come to know even just a part of that idea or being or whatever, you couldn't look at the world. You couldn't live normally after that. I think and people say, oh, well, if God's real, he'll just reveal himself. It's like, if he did, I think you'd go insane. I think if you truly were able to observe and see this thing that is beyond form, you couldn't live in the physical world anymore. You couldn't exist. You'd have to be like Enoch, where God just like, all right, come on up. You're done. Because you'd see that everything around you is essentially fake. Everything around you is derivative. Everything is an essence of an essence of an essence that comes back to this original essence that is the totality of all essences. If I look at a plate, a bowl, pattern, a piece of pottery, a dress, a dance, the idea that all of those things can be contained in all emotions and all feelings, all whatever can be contained within a single thing, in total, complete complexity, in simple complexity, in the way that there's a concept in science like the universal, I'm not sure if it's string theory, but the universal theory that, chemistry, physics and everything, eventually the idea is that it's going to be universally understood within a single idea. So you have the periodic table of elements, electrons, the weak and powerful nuclear force, and we're not going to have all these different ways of explaining things. It's all going to be in a single understandable thing. And the closest thing is string theory, which is that, on the quantum level, everything is just being bent or turned in a certain way. And that's kind of what God is. It's the encapsulation of all ideas in all forms. And it's so, again, it's so scary to think that if you could comprehend that, I don't know what would happen. It's almost like you're a child and someone gives you a candy bar, and you can think of whatever candy bar product placement of your choice, and you eat the candy bar, and that's like an experience, and it's like a whole thing, and you don't think critically about it because you're a child, your brain's kind of like whatever. And as you grow up, you kind of look at it and say, I can't believe I used to eat these things. Like, this is gross. And then you look at the nutrition value on the back. You say, you can differentiate between the wrapper and the candy bar. Maybe a child can't really do that. It's a whole new experience, and you can't compartmentalize all the different things. You have a nutrition label on the back, you have the logo, you have the company, you have the history of the company and their exploitative past, how they've mistreated their workers or something. You have all these new concepts and ways to look at something that no longer is a singular experience, but a collection of different ideas that almost dehumanizes the joy of the thing in of itself, even though you can fool yourself into still experiencing it, like a Happy Meal without knowing how unhealthy it is for you. Another example. And it's that's kind of scary, because what if you looked at everything like that? What if you looked at every single thing and thought to yourself, this is fake. This is not as real as the original or the thing that produced it. And I think that's what a lot of saints or people, and this is what I'm saying, I'm a relatively normal person. I believe that it's good to have a job and make money and be friends with people and like be a decent human being and all that stuff. And it's hard to understand those individuals in history and modern day that are completely kind of insanely selfless. People who, volunteer at soup kitchens, or people like Mother Teresa, people who devote themselves entirely to a singular idea and concept. And, you see them and you observe them and they're kind of like a thing to you, like celebrities. Oh yeah, like Brad Pitt is an idea to me. It's like, oh yeah, he's a thing in my mind. You don't actually know that person until you actually meet them in real life. And of course, they're never like what you expect, because the idea and the thing in actuality are two different things. But I guess what I'm saying is I can understand people like Mother Teresa. I can understand people like the popes or the extreme saints, or people like Francis of Assisi, who just found something so true or so real that everything else, all the materials and all the statue, all the emotions, everything became nothing. I'm saying I get it now, that a certain level of humility and understanding to realizing that you are in someone else's world, that you are part of, you're like more of a sheep than a shepherd in this game of life. And everything that can and should and could and would happen to you are all working on variables that may or may not be observed by higher powers. I mean, they probably are observed. Whether they're interfered or not, I'm not sure. I mean, people pray all the time, and who knows really the nature of people's prayers. And I know there's something else I thought of, is that I think the worst thing that could ever happen to you is that you get what you pray for, or you get what you want and not what you need. And that's, I don't know if that's happening to me right now, because I got something I wanted and now I'm not sure if it's what I need. And that's why I'm a little bit scared, because I prayed for something that I thought wasn't possible, and it happened. And I was happy at first, but I was also terrified that it worked. And now I almost feel like, because I thought it was impossible, I don't deserve it. And it makes me, again, this whole concept of, believing in something is really a series of coincidences, right? Someone tells you, don't get on the red subway because that'll take you to the evil station or something. You're like, yeah, sure, whatever. You just get so. And then someone else tells you the same thing. And someone else, you hear a story, and then piece by piece by piece, despite what the media or whatever one tells you, you have personal experiences that all add up to a truth or to reality that only you can really know. And you realize that you're, you could say in a simulation, but you realize you're in, it's like you're in a story. You're like a character in a story. And as much as you've tried to write your own path, you realize that there are just things outside your control. And that's a part of Stoicism. I mean, the whole point of Stoicism is that accepting that there are things out of your control and just going with the flow without losing yourself, like in a Buddhist way. But yeah, it's just the idea that you don't understand what your true nature. You don't understand what you truly are, because you're just a version of a version of a version I know this is like an episode of like some sci-fi show where you find out you're the clone. Oh, I thought it was the original this whole time. No, you're the clone. You're the version of a more pure idea. And yet you're also extremely pure in your individualization. And again, that goes to the whole sci-fi thing of like, well, where do you define the difference between an individual and a copy of that individual? Where does the soul propagate with the whole like android thing? Like, do androids dream of electric sheep or whatever? Do androids have souls, essentially? What are their criteria for a human? This is all Blade Runner stuff, right? Like, okay, a replicant. The one thing robots are not allowed to do is to give birth. And that's the whole point of that series, which took me a long time to kind of figure out, like, oh, what if robots could get pregnant? What if we made something that was so human that it was more human than we were? Scary. Anyway, I think I've reached the end of my thought process here, but all I can say is that I've been hit with this wave of extreme humility. I realized that my deadly sin for a while now that I had no purview into is it's pride, but I don't call it that because I think just language has this is like a different topic entirely, kind of, but I think with the 7 deadly sins, if you actually look at them, they're all normal behaviors, but in excess. Gluttony and eating. Well, you need to eat to survive, but overeating is bad. Envy. Well, you need things to sustain yourself, like a roof over your head, but having too much envy over things you don't need, that's bad. And so, pride, that is essentially a overbelief in yourself. Like, you need an ego. Everyone needs an ego in order to live, in order to survive, in order to not get pushed over and be pushed around, because God, he wouldn't want that either. He wants you to love yourself. If you love Jesus, Jesus loves you, and therefore you should love yourself. That's the implication of that. And you should hate the things about yourself that, make you worse. And further to that, that's why I think the word pride in the way we use it is not sufficient, because you can be proud of your accomplishments. You can be proud of what you've done and who you are. And I see the elimination of pride in oneself as a negative thing. I think that's too much of a overcorrection, because if you have no pride, you have no ego. And so I think a more appropriate word to use for the sin of pride is arrogance, where you have so much ego that you don't realize your shortcomings and how you hurt others, or how you can be callous or insensitive or too self-centered. And I think arrogance is a better way to describe that. And I've kind of I've personally realized that myself, and as an offshoot of that, whether in relationships or the workplace or whatever, it's kind of been the aspect of humility that has made me realize where I've personally messed up. And part of that humility is realizing that I am just part of God's little theater show, that I am a derivative of a derivative of a derivative, that I am a descendant from an aspect of an idea or a form. And I need to show respect to the essence from which I was created from, which, if you follow it all the way back to Adam and before that, it is a breath from the divine creator, from God. And I don't know what more to say to that. I'm thankful for this insight, but it's really changed me as a person, and I feel this might be a turning point in my life. And I've had things happen to me recently that I didn't realize were problems, but they were problems. And I don't know. I'm trying to combat, I guess, and push back against what I think is one of my problems. And of course, everyone does, Jungian shadow integration and whatnot. But now it's kind of almost like not suppressing or oppressing myself, but balancing, realizing, okay, I was actually really too far on this thing, and kind of pulling back and recalibrating and having a philosophical moment at the same time. And I just wanted to share that with you guys. I think that one thing that comes to mind is, I think it's in the Bible, but it's also definitely in the Bhagavad Gita that says, the best course for the wise is not to hoard knowledge, but to share it. And so I've had this idea that I should be more like a servant rather than a master, and a servant to the Most High and Most Divine, and not be, I don't know. I feel like it'll make me more patient with people. And I've realized that there are some people or some situations I've been in where there's like my family or friends where they just do something really stupid. And my impulsion is to get angry with them and be like, you really shouldn't do that. And I feel like it's time for me to switch to like almost a paternal or parent-like figure that says, look, I understand and I comprehend what you're trying to do, but I think there's a better way to do this. Instead of getting upset, and being upset and angry is kind of like a lower energy vibration, and it kind of puts that aspect of your frustration over you rather than having it suppressed and having that sort of supernal love overflow onto it. And it's more of like a spiritual, emotional kung fu, which you definitely find in the Bible, where it says, love your enemies, which doesn't mean be a pushover, but it means that you have to emotionally and spiritually put your challenges beneath you and say, okay, I don't know how to deal with this, but I'm going to move forward on it as something that can be dealt with and doesn't directly affect me in a certain way, if that makes sense. Anyway, I think I'm just finally fully internalizing the idea that we are children of God, but not just children in a biological sense, but in a programming sense. We are the object class from which the parent is derived from, the source, and we're just pieces, sparks, elements of that source. And that doesn't mean that you aren't valuable or useful or an individual. It just means that you realize that you have a connection to something that is so grand and beyond you that you want to fulfill the nature of your intended purpose in a way. And you should fear not doing that, because it means you'll be incomplete or unoptimized, or you'll be lacking in a way that you won't comprehend until you come to understand your true nature. Anyway, I can't think of anything more to say, more prose or whatnot, but I think that's basically it. So it's showing understanding and respect, and even the lack of understanding or the approaching of understanding of a ununderstandable, incomprehensible source. It's following the patterns to a source which contains all patterns, and being in awe and in fear and in trembling acceptance of it. It's very much like Kierkegaard. It's fear and trembling, faith in a thing that you don't understand. That's his leap of faith, by the way. It's that you have faith in something that you say, you know what, I don't know what this is, but it is more powerful and more present than I am. It's more real than I am. And I have to surrender to it because I have no other choice. And in a way, it's a lot like love, in a way. Love is something that just happens. It just occurs. And similar to religion or other things in your life that are beyond your control, you have no choice but to let them happen. They just occur. And when they occur, there's something beyond you that takes over, and the only thing you can do is surrender to it and embrace it. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say, and I think we'll leave it there. Anyway, I wish you all a blessed day, and have a good one, guys. Take care.